Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. And our guest today was a preacher once adamantly opposed to marijuana. His world was flipped upside down when his three sons were diagnosed with a disease called PANDAS, which means auto is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal infections, which eventually led to a cancer diagnosis in his son Michael. And he did a complete 180 with his beliefs in cannabis and became a strong advocate for it once he saw it had the incredible impact that it had on his life and the lives of his sons. Now he works to spread the gospel about medical benefits of cannabis and is writing his own memoir, The Pot Preacher. Michael Sanicola, thanks so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today, sir.
All right. Well, Montel, it's great to see you. You look awesome. I mean, I've been a fan for years, and I feel it's a real honor. I've been on this journey for about 12 years now. This will be the 12th year. And here I am finally talking to Montel Williams. So thank you.
No, thank you, sir. And I should say on behalf of everyone in the movement, thanks so much for your turnaround. But let's go back for a little bit and let's talk to people and tell people about your background during your time as serving as a foreign missionary.
Yeah. So when I was 23, 24 years old, actually 23, I finished up with college, and I really was searching. I was really lost. I was a baseball player, played baseball right down the road from you at University of Miami. I was there from 1981 to 1983, and I sustained a pretty serious neck injury, back injury. And then I was still fortunate to go on a little bit longer after that, but I got hurt, and it really kind of shut me up. I mean, hitting a pole running full stride, full speed will wake up your world. I thought I was going to die, and it was rough. And basically what we did was it kind of sobered me up spiritually. And so I started pursuing God via the scriptures, the Judeo-Christian scriptures, and turned my life around. Really committed myself to a more noble cause after baseball. And of course, baseball was able to pay for my college tuition, thanks to the rearing of my parents. But basically, we just, I decided to dedicate my life. And my wife and I did that. Been married over 33 years now. It's quite a long time. And we have run into some number of roadblocks with our children, starting from birth, which is now over 30 years ago. Our sons are men now. And here we are, and going through that transformation of being in the ministry and cannabis not being accepted, myself preaching against marijuana in front of thousands and thousands of people. And of course, I was ignorant and didn't know what I was talking about at the time. And then years later, my son was diagnosed with cancer, and that, shook me up, woke me up, and then started walking that path.
Well, before we jump into that, though, let's back up a little bit. Talk a little bit. Let's talk about that perspective on cannabis that you had, developed in your younger years. Especially as a preacher. What were some of the things you used to say in some of your, your sermons about cannabis?
Well, first and foremost, as you know, most people in our society are nescient. The information regarding cannabis has been hidden from the public, myself included. When I went through my Bible studies to train as a minister, it was always considered a sin coming from one of the scriptures out of Galatians and a number of others. It refers to, or it's lumped into pharmakia, which is where we get the word pharmacy today, which has nothing to do with cannabis in many ways. And so I started doing it. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I find that very interesting, though, that you would tune to that passage in the Bible, but also skip over the fact that, the three wise men carried to the baby Jesus incense, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense is a plant that literally has the same types of properties as cannabis in some ways. They do provide euphoria, and it does kind of, back in that day, back 2,000 years ago, people used to burn that inside of tents, especially for colicky babies and other people like that, because it was kind of sedative and also helpful. So it seems weird to me I've often wondered, I just wanted to ask a preacher,
Yeah.
if the wise men were wise men, well, why would they bring the baby Jesus something he shouldn't be doing? And if it was
Well,
good for the baby Jesus, why isn't it good enough for all of us?
yeah. Well, a couple things. First of all, I'm no longer a preacher. I haven't. I resigned from ministry many years ago um, because of this particular issue. And there's no bitterness towards those folks. That's where they were at as far as their enlightenment. But we'll get into that later.
Mm.
But really, what happens is, so you can have a scripture. You can have the Judeo-Christian scriptures, and you can have that one document, and yet you can have 300 plus different denominations. You could take, you can create whatever narrative and focus on any particular group of scriptures that you like in order to solidify your dogma. And so that's what happens. And clearly you understand this, and our audience, is that the cloud of prohibition, once that seed of prohibition is planted into the minds that cannabis, and they call it marijuana. I don't call it marijuana. I call it cannabis. Once that's in there, psychologically, there's damage. Even today, with it being legal in so many different states, and you can legally use cannabis, churches today have a long way to go as far as understanding. And that transformation, that journey for me was difficult. But it was eye-opening, and it opened my heart, it opened my mind. I was wrong on so many issues. And until I got hit in the face, so to speak, spiritually, I got spiritually sober. It's like, okay, your sons are having seizures. Your youngest son has cancer. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I was only 49 at the time. I just turned 60. And I was like, what is going on with my world? I gotta figure this out. And if it wasn't for a friend at my job at work, he says, Mike, you need to consider medical marijuana, cannabis. I said, oh, there's no way I could do that. I'm a Christian, I'm a preacher, or aspire to again, what have you. And I started digging into, number one, the history, number two, the science, number three, how does it treat me personally? How do I respond to cannabis personally? And number four, what do the scriptures say about it? And as you pointed out, Montel, when I really studied the ideology of cannabis and going back to the roots, of course, you get to Genesis, you go to Exodus chapter 30, verse 20 and following, they use 6 pounds of cannabis flower to make the anointing holy oil for the priest. There you go. I had
That's,
to readjust my game.
I mean, I think a lot of people have to readjust their games
Yes,
because,
sir.
and you've touched on so much in just, two minutes, that response to that question. But, when I understand having a personal event that literally woke you up and made you stop and think. But you made a comment about the fact that, churches across the country, you know, jumped on board the prohibition world. But before prohibition was put in place in 1937, we were a nation that was really in some ways built on cannabis. We can
Absolutely.
go all the way back to, our founding fathers and back to, the late 1500s. And, every ship that crossed the oceans with seeds, with bags full of seeds of hemp, because we recognize that the hemp seed was one of the most protein laden seeds on the planet. So people ate hemp porridges when we founded the 13 colonies. Almost every single, it was a requirement that you grew hemp if you were a farmer, from
Right.
our forefathers to those who wrote the Constitution. They all grew hemp because if you owned a farm, you were supposed to do so because it was a revenue generating a plant that literally actually helped this country survive its first 100 years without any doubt. Most people don't recognize the fact that the entire Revolutionary Army for the U.S. side was clothed in hemp fibers. The term the term canvas comes from cannabis.
Absolutely.
Um, there are so many historical facts about the fact that we grew it, we used it. Every sail, every rope that was used in our entire fleets were made from hemp. So it's crazy how it just took one butthead, a guy by the name of Anslinger, who decided to, you know, during prohibition of alcohol, he was in favor of cannabis. But
Mhm.
it wasn't until alcohol was, prohibition ended that he decided to find something else to hang his hat on, and then decided to be as adamant about, the prohibition for cannabis, which again, you said I prefer to use the term cannabis myself also because, marijuana was a term that was created to vilify the plant based on
Absolutely.
a term that was used for Mexican prostitutes. People don't know that. That's where Mary Jane, marijuana comes from.
Right.
So it's so crazy. I mean, for you, that must have been just, I don't know whether the weight lifted off your chest, but that had to be an epiphany moment for you to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. It was jaw dropping. I just, it started out where you just go, what? Whoa. And you just keep reading and you keep reading and you keep reading. And then you find documents going back 10,000 years where they find hemp strands in Taiwan. And it goes on and on. When the history was one thing, and I know we're going to get into the medical here in a little bit, but I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm going to be very blunt with you. I was in the ministry for nearly 2 decades, and I've been out for quite a while. And although I still have an interest in helping those folks as a consultant, a cannabis consultant, to bridge that gap as we're discussing, but I didn't swear. And I didn't swear for like 2 decades. Now, I'm not trying to be pious or anything of that nature. It's just that was the way it was for me. It was an issue of consciousness. When I started studying about the truths that had been hidden of cannabis, for example, in 1940, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, who was the first person who responded to my book that's coming out, he wants a copy of it. But Dr. Ralph, it was amazing. He discovered it, he knew that something was going on in the 1940s, and then in 1980 he developed the CBD, showing that it had a major effect and impact in controlling seizures. And what happened? Absolutely nothing, right? Nobody did anything. And so now, of course, that's changed, and it has progressed much further than that. But as a parent, when you find out that your kid could have been helped, that someone kept a cure or a medicine or something to treat on a long-term basis, that was kept hidden from us. From it, I mean, I started to swear, and it really drove my wife. It was tough for my wife, but um, you know, we adjusted.
that eye opener that you had. I mean, I'm one of the only people to have interviewed Dr. Mechoulam in his laboratory in Israel.
I know you did.
People understand and don't recognize the fact that a lot of the research that Mechoulam was doing was based on funding from the United States government. So we funded a lot of what Raphael ended up identifying. He's gone on to identify everything from, the endocannabinoid system and actually breaking out where the receptors were. He was the first person to identify THC, Delta 19. He literally is the godfather of cannabis, if you will, in so many ways. But a lot of people don't know that the reason why he was able to do so is because the US government funded him. So when you really want to be outraged and say, how can they hide something from you? I mean, the fact that you came to this revelation, I don't know if you recognize the fact that, our government filed for a patent on CBD back
Absolutely.
in 1998. It gave itself a patent in 2002 and recognized in its abstract exactly what they deemed were the benefits of cannabinoids. And we're still finding more and more research out as we sit here today. About 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, there was a double-blind peer-reviewed study that came out that talked about the fact that we found that some of the flavonoids have a greater anti-inflammatory effect than some of the things that are on the market right now, and have an exact effect on what's going on in inflammation in the COVID uh,
Yes.
virus. So there's so much more that needs to be learned, and so much more that we need to be talking about and making sure people are well aware of.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit and talk about it now. You are a person who spent, I say, understands trauma. Yeah, that's an understatement, my buddy and my friend. Why don't you tell people a little bit? I was reading a little bit about your personal history and your physical trauma. You've suffered everything from a fractured skull to, as a child, to, having, torn a knee open, riding a bicycle that you ended up jumping into a public swimming pool with, and then getting an infection from that almost caused you to be an amputee. You've gone on, you've fractured your tibia twice, you broke your nose 3 times, you broke your big toe, you dislocated your shoulder, you've dislocated your index finger, you've gone through 2 separate knee operations, broken numerous teeth. been kneed in the jaw. You've been injured, 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 injured. So you're a guy walking around as a walking ball of pain, are you not?
Well, thanks to cannabis, I'm not. But the answer to that, the short answer would be yes. I mean, if I didn't maintain, I take my daily dose of oils. I make my own oils. I keep a steady flow to keep the balance, the equilibrium, right? The homeostasis within the body, regulating temperature, digestion, all of it. And it really helps. I think as you get older, as we age, those cannabis and terpene profiles, they change a little bit. At first, when you early on dealing with depression, you want something that's going to work on your mind, your head, a sativa type of flower, or then a profile. Then your body, my shoulders, my knees, my neck, my spine. Well, you got to switch to an indica, and some of these edibles are just really therapeutic today. And of course, it's all about dosage, as you know, Montel. People mess up with edibles, but it's about quality and dosage. And I've received, and this is baseball, no, Mason, it's just baseball. But I played football in high school as well. And I think that was one of the second times I broke my nose. But yeah, I'm a little guy. I competed at a very high level in sports, at the University of Miami, NCAA. When you're a small guy, my nickname was Psycho. So that'll kind of help you out a little bit, give you a picture. And I paid the price. I sacrificed my body to perform, right? You got to make it happen. You're not thinking that, hey, you know what, Michael, when you're 60 years old, you're going to have a heck of a time. You don't think that when you're 22 years old.
No, not at all.
And
So,
you shouldn't.
now what's again? You mentioned it, but now let's go back and talk a little bit about it. You and your wife are martial arts smartly. You have 3 kids, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, your children, were they all diagnosed simultaneously, or what happened? What started to happen in your family?
Right, right. Well, so first of all, let's talk about PANDAS. What is PANDAS? Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with the Streptococcus bacteria. And basically, our youngest son, he was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil in 1990. When he was born, now we eventually traced this back and we figured it out, and the doctors figured it out as well because of good records. But our eldest son, who's now a man, he's 30 years old, he's doing wonderful. He's a professional. He runs a kitchen at a large Tex-Mex restaurant. He's a manager. He works all the time, and we're very proud of him. So just to give you the perspective, he's doing awesome. But when he was young, he would have these complex partial seizures, and he would have them for hours and hours and hours. And he was undiagnosed for 9 years. Now, as you can imagine, when you're going through these seizures, there's just a lot of fallout from that. And you go to the typical pharmaceutical medication. I won't name them because I don't want to go down that path. But some of those medications, the side effects of those medications were, seizures. So that wasn't going to work. But we persevered for 9, 10 years. And it wasn't until our eldest son, when he was having all these seizures and other issues occur, cognitive issues, depression, agitation. PANDAS is actually on the autism spectrum. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just as a quick side note, it's a broad spectrum. Okay, you can have a very severe situation and go from there. But this was undiagnosed. I think my eldest son is the longest longitudinal case study of PANDAS. It's a pediatric issue, but now he's 30, and we have seen over the years, going back now, 12 years, almost 12 years, that cannabis, specifically CBD and THC combined, the entourage effect, helped him. And this is also proven out in the work by Dr. Raphael Mechoulam in dealing with the basal ganglia of the brain. And so when we realized that Nico is having a problem, we just persevered. At the same time, simultaneous to this, when his younger brother was born, Giovanni, also, he's a young man now, he's doing great. He was having night terrors. For 15 years, he would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, running through the house, rolling downstairs. He would be bruised and cut. He would remember nothing the next day. I would have to go into this.
I'm sorry, were your sons born like a year apart, or are they
3 years apart? 3 years apart.
So they all but they all ended up having streptococcus
Yeah,
and
that is correct, sir. Yeah,
pandas?
that is correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
And
I'm gonna cut you off.
yeah, so they had tonsillectomies. Now there's different. Keep in mind the science on pandas back then was to immediately get a tonsillectomy, which kind of helped in some ways, but also they would give you antibiotics, which now they know is really not a solution for that. But guess what works really well, and that is you mentioned it, essential oils. There's a whole group of people, pandas patients that use essential oils, as you mentioned, and I'm bringing to the table cannabis and CBD with THC, the entourage, dose dependent, of course, and it has a tremendous effect on pandas children under the autism
How
spectrum
did you
disorder.
figure this? How did you figure this out? Let's slow down for a second and back up. So your first son, how old
Yes,
was
sir.
he when he first started demonstrating symptoms of pandas?
From birth, he drooled from the day he was born. He just kept drooling and drooling and drooling, and we didn't know what was going on. We kept going to the pediatrician, and it's probably nothing. It'll pass. These are the kind of things that parents go through. It'll pass. It'll pass. And then one day when he was 2 years old, he was holding my finger. I was taking him for a walk. We lived in Denver, and he was holding my finger, and he started to grit his teeth, like and squeeze my finger. And I thought, wow, you're so strong. Look how strong he is. And my wife had a nursing background. She goes, no, honey, I think he's having a seizure. And then, of course, you go in and have the test, and they were inconclusive at the time. But over the years, you saw it. It was all the time. It was constant. And where it really manifests itself, where you go, wow, we really have a problem, is when the kids go to school, right? When they go to school, that's when you first notice, whoa, there's a little bit of challenge here. So a lot of irritation, a lot of agitation, a lot of body tics. He would run out of the movie theater just screaming. One time he jumped out of a moving van going to the doctor because he was giving a certain type of pharmaceutical medication, which they thought at the time was to pacify or appease him. And it did just the opposite. I mean, thank God we were in the parking lot. It opens the door and jumps out of the van. This is going back 1997 or 8 or something like that.
And
1999, excuse me.
at
Yeah.
this time, you were still a minister, so you're not treating
Yes.
the kid.
Yeah.
You haven't treated the cannabis yet. So what literally led you down the path to say, I've got to figure this thing out? What led you down the path to even think about cannabis with your son?
Yeah. So we were juggling our two eldest sons with seizures and night terrors. Then when Michael came along, Michael's 24, Gino's 27, and Nico's 30 right now. But when Michael came along as a young kid, we thought, oh, awesome. No symptoms. It looks like he's doing great. But then, you get that horrible phone call.
Is this like a predisposed genetic disorder or
No, I don't believe. Okay, so when you look at, I'm a strong believer in epigenetics. I'm a student of Dr. Bruce Lipton and some of those folks, and really a lot of disease would come from the environment. Somehow, my son Nico was exposed to streptococcal bacteria, stayed with them, stayed dormant within him for years and years, spread to his brother, apparently went to the other brother. They don't have it all figured out, but when you study the etiology of this disease, the most consistent thing about pandas is inconsistency, because some of the symptoms may manifest in body tics, tearing clothes off, like they can't wear clothes or they can't keep shoes on, and this is very challenging when you're a kid, when you're a parent as well. You're like, whoa, what's going on? But you survive because you love. But the one that got us to cannabis was getting that phone call that Michael had cancer. I was in Denver. Dina was in North Carolina at the time. Got that phone call, and that's why you get a great beard, But
Sure.
you get that call, and eventually we found out on 9/9/9 that he had cancer, and on 9/11, just a couple of days later, we found out that it was stage 4. And at that point, Montel, the gloves come off, man. What do I need to do? I don't care about law, a religious dogma, money, what anybody's opinion is, except those who can help my son. And I took it on as a parent. That's my responsibility, right? That's my responsibility to find out and to guide my son in collaboration with professionals.
And Michael is your youngest son.
Yes, sir.
So now, at this point in time, though, you've gone through 7 years of dealing with your older son and these symptoms that really no one had an explanation for. They tell you it's a disease called PANDAS, and this is the way we treat it, but you weren't treating it at all with any cannabis at that point in time, right?
No, actually, it went on for 18 years.
Okay.
18 years.
All
Yeah.
right. So then your youngest son gets diagnosed with it. What type of cancer did he get diagnosed with?
Hodgkin's lymphoma,
And
stage 4.
I should let you know that my daughter also went through 2 rounds of that, so I understand and
Yes,
understand.
sir. Oh, you and I have a lot of empathy. In preparing for this interview, I'm so amazed by your life and story. You're such an inspiration. But I knew of that and seizure disorder as well. And cannabis woke me up. But it had to start with me. Montel. Like I had to get my own conviction about it as a parent because at that time Michael was just a kid. He was just 12 years old.
And you are still a minister.
No, sir.
No, you had left the church at that point in time?
Yes. And then I was brought in a number of years later on a short stint where, you try to, I'm going to change the church. It's a little tough converting churches. It was a noble desire, but that wasn't going to happen. And even today, my goal is not to convert churches. It's to help people who are looking for other solutions to their health issues, namely cancer, seizures, and other items, other issues. So,
You're
but
already
yeah.
and then what, did somebody suggest it to you? Did somebody say, hey, you ought to read this?
Yes, sir. My buddy at work, Mark, he's from Boston, good guy. And he says, Mike, listen, you got to check into this. And, I'm a reader. So I grabbed everything. The first mistake I made, when you're diagnosed with cancer, or your child's diagnosed with cancer, they give you a book that's, 3 inches thick with the 13 different medications or chemicals to kill the cancer cells. And after you get done reading that and the potential side effects and fallout, I was gripped with fear. My problem was fear. So I was so fearful. I thought I had a heart attack. My friend said, Michael, you got to get yourself under control. And so I studied, then I went and got my medical red card back in 2009, 2010. It used to be called a medical marijuana red card in Colorado. And that's when I really started to dive into it personally and experiment and figure out how to be a caretaker for my son.
And you recognized, with your son with cancer, with Michael, that what did you see? What benefits did you see out of giving him utilizing cannabis then?
Immediately, we didn't necessarily see an effect. Michael finished, he started his chemotherapy in September. September 11th. He started and he ended 2000. That was 2009, and then he finished his last round of chemo January 10th, 2010, and then we moved. I was already working in Denver, but the family was in North Carolina, and so of course cannabis was not legal there. So the whole family moved to Colorado, and that's when Michael started on a cannabis regimen. But it was a comorbidity situation where he also had a brain Chiari, a brain malformation in the back of your neck, which was probably caused by he played tackle football. All my kids were very heavily involved in sports, regardless of their medical issues. But he had a Chiari where it cuts off your spinal fluid to your body, and he had to have surgery for that. And so cannabis, that's when we really knew that cannabis was very effective in helping pain because he was having ice pick headaches in combination with the cancer. You don't really know. People ask me, Mike, what does the cannabis do? It does so many things, as you know, all at the same time, right? I mean, it has this organic dynamic that affects every part of your body. And so it helped him mostly with pain. But later on in life, like 7 years later, Montel, it helped them with the condition called chemo brain. So women who have breast cancer that get treated, let's say they call it the red devil, and my son accidentally had that one, but kids that get chemo, years later, they suffer what they call chemo brain. I'm sure you're familiar with this term. And so the school that he was going to at the time, his high school, the teachers, Colorado's a great state. I mean, we have Jack's Law. which allows children who struggle with certain medical conditions have access to the oils while they're in school, distributed by the church. It's all very regulated. But so we had to go through all that, and we found out that Michael was really struggling with chemo brain. And, it was a struggle. And, in the context of what we're talking about, Montel, is that there's a lot of love and support that goes on around it, and that's how you survive, right? Because you have a good support system of family and love, and you survive. You try to keep figuring it out. But when he got cancer, that really got me. That's what blew it up.
And
Literally blew it up.
so you started first, not experimenting, but utilizing cannabis with Michael. But then what made you think, well, if it worked for him, maybe it'll help my other two sons? Because your other sons had different types of symptoms from the pandas, right?
Yes, sir.
So in each one of their cases, cannabis has kind of helped them differently, correct?
Correct. So that you bring up a good point. So let's say our middle son, Giovanni, who's an awesome guy, awesome athlete, he would have these night terrors. Now, unknown to myself and my wife, Dina, Gino began smoking pot when he was 15 years old. He was doing it, illegally, of course. And all of a sudden, my wife and I noticed, because I would come in from Colorado, I'd come visit, Michael was just diagnosed. I come in, stay for a while, I'd go through some chemo sessions, what have you, and then I get on a plane and leave. But we noticed that Giovanni started sleeping at night. That's like, wait a minute. All of a sudden, at 15, 16 years old, he's sleeping through the entire night. What's he doing? Now, unknown to the rest of my family, I did not share with them at that moment that I started to research cannabis and that I had gotten a medical card. I had done that while I was physically separate. When the family got together back in North Carolina, when I came back and visited, I noticed that Giovanni was sleeping. He says, "Look, Dad, I'm smoking pot." My wife and I looked at each other and we were just ecstatic that it worked. And ready for this, Montel? He started doing better in school. He started doing better in school because you sleep. You take someone's sleep away, and you're going to have a real problem.
Right.
You're going to have a motivation problem. You're going to have a fatigue problem. But when you don't get sleep, that mitochondria, those cells, those energy of the cells, they get destroyed, and you're dragging. You're struggling, and it has neurological and cognitive consequence. So you have to stay on top of that. And he's done. He's recovered well, and he's still at it. He's still
Sure. And how did it affect your oldest son?
Oh man, boy, you want to talk about the difference in sons. My eldest son, one of the manifestations of PANDAS, one of his manifestations is OCD, compulsive disorder, and it's a blessing and a curse at sometimes. He was a wrestler in high school. He wasn't a wimp. He's 6 foot tall. I'm the smallest guy in the family. I mean, he's 6 foot tall. He wrestled at 153, and he just threw everything into it. He was just a tough guy, and he still is today. But he needed CBD to calm him down. So let me give you just a quick illustration of what PANDAS does. So say you get the strep bacteria. It's in your system and you have strep throat. It's also asymptomatic. You know that through a titer test, but that's another story. But basically, you're irritated, you're agitated. Well, we figured out that what Nico needed more than anything was cannabidiol. He needed that CBD with the THC, right? Because you have to have the CB1 receptor too, because you're dealing with the basal ganglia, you're dealing with the brain. And you put that together, and the entourage effect has really helped him calm down to where he's still focused. And I tell people, it's food, right? I mean, it's food. It's like water. It's a supplement. And so when he's consistent, and which we all need to be, it's all about, dosage, quality material, dosage, and consistency. And when he stays on that, it just calmed him down. So I have one son who was super unmotivated because he can never sleep. With that comes depression and other issues. The other one can't stop moving. And Michael, he has all kinds of nicknames. Sometimes they call him the old man. He's kind of an old soul. He came close to death. He almost died right in front of us, right in front of our eyes. And thank God for the nurse, Paula. She saved his life. We watched the red devil go into his veins, and he sat up, and it was horrible, But a lot of families go through this. Listen, the survival is to get tough, right? You got to embrace it. You can't back down, right? You got to attack it. And that's what I kept doing. And, you know, I'm about 30 years into this now. We're still attacking it and trying to be good parents and all of that. And, you know, these guys, they're men, right? I mean, they're men. They make their own decisions, but I give them information, and they have their own people that they take care of.
And
They take care of others.
now tell me, what made you decide to now write a book now? Because you're in the process of writing your book. It's not done yet, correct?
Well, it's done. It's a working process. The book I started writing. It's actually The Pod Preacher was a working title. The new one given to me by my agent Adrian Rosado with Stone Song Literary Agency out of New York, is The Cannabis Conversion, removing removing the cure from the taboo. That's the subtitle as well. And so they put it together. They had to restructure the book because the book was a little bit too religious focused, and then they revamped it and made it more, more like, it talks about my life, my baseball heritage, my parents, talks about the kids and each of their lives. I guess really the best way to describe it. Did you ever see the movie Seabiscuit
Yeah,
years ago?
sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's about a horse. In 1938, he wins these championships, but it's really not a movie about a horse. It's about the jockey. It's about the owner. It's about the trainer. It's about the wife. And really, they each have their different journey. And the common denominator was Seabiscuit, this horse, winning this race. But the story unfolds, and it's this drama of all these lives. They all came from different places. Like, for example, my wife, Dina, she detoxed her own liver because of pharmaceutical drugs. She does not smoke cannabis, but yet she uses cannabis oil every single day. Every single day. And she looks beautiful. She's a beautiful gal. And it's for sleep. She does it for sleep. Me, I consume all different types of ways. And so do my sons. They all have I think my one son doesn't even smoke flower anymore. He just does, like bubble hash and things of that nature. So we all kind of are very unique and different in that way as well.
So now, does the book intent, is it still called The Pot Preacher, or it's not?
It's called The Cannabis Conversion. The Cannabis Conversion. Again, it's just a working title. Adrian, right now, the book is sitting with publishers right now. They're looking at the whole entire proposal as we speak. And it really kind of lays out each of the stories, how we met Isaac Slade from the Fray. I know that you had a guest named Sylvia Brown on the Montel Williams show for years and years. I also am blessed with clairvoyance, things of that nature. My wife and I hook up on a lot of things mentally and telepathically. A lot of different events have occurred in our lives that makes the book really special. And I can tell you the Fray, the Isaac Slade story from the Fray, it's really amazing. Would you like to hear it real quick?
Well, sure.
Yeah. So real quick. So when Michael was diagnosed, after 30 days, I was with him every single day in the hospital in North Carolina. And I finally had to go back to work and leave. And that was horrible. It ripped my heart out. So I grabbed my wife's iPad, or her little iPod, and she had all these songs on it. And some of the songs were How to Save a Life, You Found Me, by a band called The Fray. Now, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they looked like. And I'm living in Denver in my uptown condominium in uptown Denver, and I'm there. And every night about 2:30 in the morning, while they're in North Carolina and I'm working in Denver, I am waking up at 2:30 in the morning, sweating, crying, and trying to get my stuff together because I was consumed with fear, knowing that my son was struggling horrifically, right? Just chronic pain. I mean, nothing worse for a parent, right? I mean, it's brutal. And I said, okay, do my cannabis regimen. And so I would wake up 2:30, 3 o'clock. I'd get my baseball bat. I'd stretch. I would medicate heavily and get myself to calm down. For me, I needed to calm down. Okay. Be calm. Be still. Be still before the Lord. Be still before yourself. Get to a level of consciousness where you can get yourself under control and feel a peace. And so I would do that. But while I would do that, I would listen to these songs over and over and over and over and over and over. So 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, I go down to my parking garage, And I get back on the elevator. It's only an 8-unit condominium building complex. And I get on the elevator, and there's this tall, slender man. We introduce one to each other, and he says, we introduce each other. And he says, yeah, my name's Isaac Slade. I'm the lead singer of The Fray. I said, what? And I told him the family story, and we became friends. We met together, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times or so. I know my wife and kids, they've all been there at the condo there. And when he performed in Nashville with Kelly Clarkson a few years later, he brought the boys backstage again and they hung out. But he became our neighbor. We'd play Frisbee in the yard and our dogs would hang out. And so it was really encouragement just to think that all this time I'm singing these songs. I'm listening to these songs because he's ministering to my soul while I'm crying and trying to find myself and try to find answers. And the guy lived right below me. That's Isaac Slade from this parade. Yeah. Crazy stuff.
That's great. And is that in the book?
Yes, sir. Chapter 2. It's called How to Save a Life.
And what is your goal with your book? Is your book trying to save a life?
Absolutely. So what has happened? So now keep in mind, Montel, this has been nearly 12 years now, right? I'm in my 12th year. So Michael was diagnosed in 2009. I started writing the book in 2014, and it went through a number of revisions and plus just dealing with life. And so I finally got a great agent. And so they started to revamp it. So what we did was people started to contact me. They would say, hey, Mike, we heard that, you're into this cannabis thing. What's going on? And so what would happen over the years is, this gentleman, I'll just say his name is Ralph, lung cancer. This person, pancreatic cancer, thyroid cancer. I started getting all this correspondence. Mike, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And because I was very versed on it, because I studied endocannabinology, people listen. And I don't treat people. One, obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I kind of lead them towards the right path, like people like Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, Dr. Frankel, right? Dr. Mashula, my mentor right now, and I'm enrolled in the healer.com class with Dr. Sulak out of Maine. So when people contact me, I'll get them in touch with these doctors, like the doctor guys out in Santa Monica. I'll say, hey, give this doctor a call. But people will sometimes come into town and we'll go to the dispensary together. We'll buy flower. I will educate them on how to make oils. I tell them what products good, what products work. I mean, this is 20 milligrams of an indica for sleep. Sleep through the night, wake up like a baby, and be totally healthy. In combination with CBD, though. Again, entourage. So these are things that I do now to help people, and I spread the word, spread the message. So the goal of the book is to get people to consider, not so much maybe run up into a cannabis conversion, so to speak, immediately. We should have a cannabis conversation. And that's what I want to do, especially with churches and pastors. A lot of people are trying to figure this whole thing out. What do we do? Is it a sin? Is it okay to do it? Can I take medical cannabis? And other people, they still shun you. You're under that cloud of, even in the church, the leadership staff think I should be in drug rehab. So that's how some of these churches, in fact, probably most of them view it. But that's okay. As long as someone's willing to have an intelligible conversation about the science, well, number one, the history, as you pointed out. Number two, the science. And number three, what can we learn? Who's doing it? Who's making it happen? Who are the people? Let's get into the trenches, into the people's living rooms, into their dining rooms. What's going on in their kitchen, man? How can we make a really good meal, add some cannabis oil to it, and make sure you get a good night's sleep, or make sure that you're not agitated or depressed? So that's what I do now, voluntarily.
And what's been the pushback? Has there been pushback from your other community?
Well, I'm not in that community no longer. 7.2 billion people on the planet. If someone doesn't, want to hang out with you or whatever, that's okay. Now, here's the ironic thing. It's mostly like the leadership group, and I'm not bitter at them. That's where they're at. That's okay. I'm not in the business of, trying to be a preacher or anything of that nature. Although I do have a very active ministry. constantly. But my goal is for, like, a lot of the patients that I have now, and I'm going to call them patients as if I were a bud tender at a dispensary. A lot of the patients I have now are people from different churches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, what do you think right now as we look at what's happening in this country over the course of the last year now that we've gone through this pandemic? And I think the nation has recognized the fact that the only recession-proof, business in this country has been cannabis in the last year. Um,
Right.
where do you think we're going? Where do you think the entire cannabis community is going? Where, or the idea of utilizing cannabis as a helpful healing plant? Where do you think that's going?
Okay. So, on a big picture, obviously, with what, over 33 states now. I didn't check this morning. I keep track with normal, but I think that federal prohibition will eventually fall. Eventually, um, I think what's scary to me is, greed is the seed, man, and it doesn't matter if it's cannabis space or whatever space. You got people that try to take over and run the entire industry, and you know about these things. Some people would take some product that wasn't as it was advertised, and they have a bad experience, and that doesn't help guys like me and you who are saying, "Hey, look, there's a right way to do this." And so my short answer is, I tell people, get involved in your local community with your local dispensary, your local people. I can introduce you if you came to Colorado Springs right now, for example, or if we went to the Western Slope in Cedar Edge, where I lived as well, where my sons live, my other two sons. There's a group of people that it's a clandestine culture, right? You go get your medical card, you go to the dispensary, you pick up your bag of cannabis, you have tools like these charts where all these great people, there's all kinds of information, right? You have all kinds of great products, 43 CBD. I don't make any money from these folks, but you look at this, go to your community. There are enough people that, or say, here, I can help you, but make sure you get the consulting, make sure you get that help, because you can mess up really easily. And so I encourage people to get involved in their local community, the cannabis scene.
And if people want to get, first off, if they want to get a hold of you or find out when your book is going to be published, where do they go? What website do they go to?
I'm going to just do email for now, and I'll type that in. It's CANNABIS, which is the biblical word, KANEH.BOSSEM, BOSEM, the number 37, at protonmail.com. And I'll give you that graphic. Will be up as soon as we can.
People can reach out to you. And when do you expect your book to be published?
Hopefully soon. I mean, this is the year to do it. Right now, with Stone Song Literary Agency out of New York, with my agent Adrian Rosado. She's doing a great job getting word out. The fact that I'm speaking with you is thanks to Adrian, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great story. We really want to get it going. We want to make it happen, and it's really up to the publishers at this point who want to take it on and go from here. But it should be a series, because it does take. There's a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts, and the treatments are all very unique in and of itself, not to mention the spiritual aspects of it.
And you think at least the first rendition of the book should be out this next year?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much, Michael, for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I applaud you for the work that you're trying to do and continue to do, and wish you much success, sir. Okay?
Montel, thank you so much. We love and respect you very much.
Absolutely. For all out there, make sure you tune in too. Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.